Right, I'm back down at Manson's Old Lake. I think there's a couple of sessions to talk about since we last did the video blog. I'm on session number 5 now. If we go back to number 3, I arrived down here on, I think it was a Friday morning. Managed to get away from work and everything and get here a little bit earlier than usual. I got here Friday morning. It was pretty quiet on the lake. Found a couple of fish cruising around in front of a swim called the Pump House. Probably maybe 40-50 yards out they were. There was a ghostie there. I think goes over £30, and a right old warrior called Scaly is one of the good fish in here. So I thought there was just a gentle breeze coming off my back, and I thought I'll get a few chum mixers out and I'll just drift them out on the wind and see if they take. You know, the ghostie sort of disappeared, to be honest, but the Scaly was hanging around, and he started having a few of the mixers, and he was quite confident as well. So I got some gear out of the van and thought I might do a little bit of fishing with a beach caster rig this time. It's nice using a beach caster because you can generally fish a bit heavier. You don't need the light hook links and the small hooks that you would generally use on like a controller setup, you know. So it's basically based on an idea. A friend of mine showed me this rig, and sort of I've changed a couple of the components, and this is my take on it really. We use a large sea fishing float like this. Believe it or not, it's not something I found in my girlfriend's knicker drawer. It is actually a sea fishing float, and you basically got a lead tied on the end of your line, on your main line. You've got this sea fishing float above that. You can probably just about see there. I'll do some close-ups on the other camera so that you can get a better look, but it's got some buffer. I've got a rubber buffer bead on each side, and it's got rigid tubing going through the middle of the float, so it can basically run on your line, you know. Now if you don't have this float on, your main line will enter the water too close to you, and you'd have to cast a hell of a long way out to get your bait positioned in the right place. So that's the float. And the hook link, this is the interesting part, to be honest. It took a little bit of thought to get the right components for this, but I've got a piece of rigid rig tube on there, and what I've done is I've heated it gently with a lighter and just put a curve in the tube. Now this means that when that's threaded onto your main line, when your main line's slack, it works like a lockside float, so it'll slide when your main line's slack, but when your main line's tight, it'll lock in place. Not tight, but it'll lock in place enough, you know, to hold the rig in position. I've got some beads on there. I've got a large eye swivel, and you'll notice that I've got a little plastic disc on there. Now the plastic disc is there basically to catch the wind when you cast. When you cast and you send the lead out, the float will follow it, and this rig, because it's got the plastic disc on, it'll fly back up the main line towards you. Now the amount that it flies towards you much depends on sort of how big the disc is. You know, if you make the disc bigger, it's obviously going to fly towards you a lot further, so it takes a little bit of messing about to get it set up right, but this one seems to be about right for me, and this probably sends the rig back about 20 foot or something like that away from the float. So I mean, you can see that you've got a big daft float on there. You don't want your rig sort of sat right next to it, you know. So that seems to work quite well. I've got, like I said, I've got a large eye swivel on there, and then that's just a £20 mono hook link. You don't need to use £10 and stuff like that. None of that line is touching the water whatsoever. And you don't have to be shy with the hook. I've got a size 6 talon tip on there, wide gape talon tip. I know that looks like a chum mixer that I've got on there, but it's not. It's actually a boilie. It's a bottom bait that's trimmed down. If you use a bottom bait, by the way, it does hold the rig, because of the weight you've got in the bait. It holds the rig a little bit more steady if there's a bit of a breeze, you know. That's basically it. It's all pretty crude really, but because there's nothing touching the water, you can get quite a few takes on it, and I'll let you watch the video to see what happened, but it works. proximity to a really good fish here. I actually had a take off him and the rig just didn't hook him, so I just released a couple of clicks off the spool, off the clutch there, and made the bait sit a little bit lower in the water, and fortunately I got another chance, and as you can see it's nailed him. Don't think he knew he was hooked at first, probably never been hooked on a rig like this, but he's going hard for the left hand side now. This is where you'd be having problems if you were on lighter floater tackle. Fortunately I've got strong gear here, and hopefully I'm going to get the upper hand. A strong fish though. See if we can get him in the net first time. Reach. Yeah, he's in. Brilliant, and made up with that. Right, as promised, this is a closer look at what we call the parachute. This is positioned on the line above your sea fishing float, and when you cast it'll grab the air and it'll fly back towards you, meaning you can position your bait further away from the float. You don't really want a hook bait that's sat right next to the float because it is big and a bit cumbersome. It could easily spook the fish as they approach your bait, you know. So I've started by getting some rigid rig tube. It's quite stiff plastic, and I've heated it up and just put a gentle bend in the middle. When you've done that, you'll notice that it'll lock on the line when your line's tight, but it'll slide when it's slack. Now I've just got a bead pushed onto this end. That one can come off quite easily. And I've got a large eye swivel. A ring swivel will work just the same, as long as it's spinning freely on there, and it'll prevent tangles when you cast. I've got another rubber bead. I've got my plastic disc, and in case you're wondering what that is, it's actually the end of an old plastic syringe. The sort of thing that you'd use for measuring flavours and what have you, for making your own pop-ups, that kind of thing. So I've taken a Stanley knife to it and cut it just the right size, and it just fits on there nicely, to be honest. I've got another rubber bead, and then you'll notice that the plastic tube at this end, I've just heated it up with a lighter, and with a baiting needle I've carefully sort of rounded the end of it off so that that bead can't come off the end of that tube. So basically that means that when you're playing a fish, this will all slide down and it will rest on top of the buffer bead that you've got on top of your sea fishing float, and that's how you'll play the fish basically. Now I use the whole thing. I normally use a 5-ounce lead with this rig. A heavier lead means it'll stay in position better. It's much easier to present, you know, to sort of present the bait really. Now you might think, oh, I don't really want to play a fish with a 5-ounce lead on, but when you've got a float that's that buoyant and that sort of size, then really when it's in the water, that lead weighs next to nothing. You can sort of set it up so that you can drop the lead and all the rest of it if you wanted to, if it's weedy, that kind of thing, but to be honest with you, normally I just keep the lead on. I'm quite happy with it. I've just got a £20 mono hook link on there. I think that's £20 Hydro Tough, to be honest. I've just fastened it with a grinner. Simple as that, really. If you find the bits that you need, get the components together, it's a very, very easy rig to make, and I'm sure it'll put you a few fish on the bank. If you have got any questions and you're stuck with anything, you know, feel free to get in touch with me on Facebook. Send us a message on there and I'll try and help out if I can. Right, on to session number 4. I've just done a feature on the new lake for Crafty Carper. Really enjoyed that. I had 24 hours left and I thought might as well go and spend it on the old lake if I can get on. So I had a drive round and I found some fish over in the margins by a peg called First Corner. I got up a tree there and I saw a scaly, funnily enough, and he was sort of waddling along the margin there, milling around a little bit, and a couple of minutes later I got my first glimpse of Arnie. Made Scaly look like a tadpole, to be honest with you. He's a right unit of a fish, and there was no mistaking which one it was. You know, he's got a bit of a droopy tail, Arnie has, and you could see that clearly, even though the water wasn't very clear. So I thought I'd set up in First Corner. That's what the peg's called over there, and fished the margin to the left. I used tiny little leads, about an ounce, maybe a little bit less. Just enough really to get the distance without causing a load of disturbance. And I've just been sort of flicking a bit of particle in. This is the gear that I've been using from my company called Cutting Edge Products. Really good stuff. I think it's less obvious using particles. You know, it's not like going down there and putting loads of boilies in and what have you. And just scatter a few of these particles down the margin there. You know, really spreading it out as well, and just hoping that some of these fish will get down and feed. You know, when you've seen your target fish in an area, you've got to fish it really, you know. So that was that. It was quite warm that day, but overnight the pressure dropped, wind came in and rain. The next morning looked really good. There was fish crashing all over the show. Quite a few were crashing over towards the island, which wasn't the water that I could fish from there, but I still fancied this margin. The fish just seemed really active all over the lake, you know. It was amazing really. I think it was about an hour before I had to leave. I had a take on the left hand rod. This mid-20 common sort of ripped off and it gave me a right scrap. It dragged me all over the show, to be honest with you. I just didn't want to give up for ages like they do, these commons sometimes. So that was a really nice fish, absolutely immaculate. Probably about half the size of the one that I wanted to catch, but we'll take that for now. And that was, what, that's 3 fish in 4 visits then. So we're making progress, you know. I saw Arnie again today. I'm on my 5th session now. I did promise that I'd go through some rigs, the ones that I sort of use the most and take pretty much anywhere with me. But because we've done the Beachcaster one this time, then I'll sort of save those and we'll do them next time. Alright, see you again soon.